Hi girls. So I'm really late to the party on this one, but I feel like I owed it to myself to make a review about this because I reviewed the Girls series a couple of years ago. And at the end of that video, I said that Jacqueline Wilson should write a catch-up book. I said it should be called Girls Grown Up, but she decided to call it Think Again. I didn't even know that this was coming out. I know a lot of people were really excited about this, but I had no idea. And so it just appeared on the shelf in the bookshop one day when I was visiting, and I thought, oh, I'm going to see what Jacqueline Wilson is writing nowadays. And I picked it up, and I'm pretty sure the first word in the blurb is Ellie, right? Or something. And I just freaked out. Every other book that I was considering that day just flew out of the window. And I was like, I have to get this. And I devoured it of the entire month of December, and it made me feel alive for half a sec. So for all of these reasons, I really need to do this review. I really loved the Girls series growing up, and so it was really fun to just dive into this and just really enjoy it. I did have some predictions going into it. I thought that the obvious thing to think, based on like how we all remember the series, with like Magda as the flirty one and Nadine as the more serious one, that it would be easy for Jacqueline Wilson to write Nadine as being in like a happy long-term relationship, and Magda to like still be the flirty fun one who can't commit. If I know Jacqueline Wilson, what she's going to do is she's going to flip that on its head. And we do see a little bit of that, so I was happy about that. And I also thought that it'd be interesting to see a little bit of exploration of maybe if Ellie was like gay or like bi, because I know the way that Jacqueline Wilson's own life trajectory has gone since writing these books. And I feel like there was a lot of herself in Ellie. Like there's a lot of herself in a lot of her characters in different ways. Ellie never really had a lot of involvement with boys, and even the ones that she did have involvement with, it was an odd dynamic to say the least. So I felt like it wouldn't be completely out of the realm of possibility to have Ellie have a relationship with a woman. So the plot, Ellie is turning 40. She's experiencing a lot of change. Her child has moved out and she's living on her own for the first time in like 20 years. And she's also unfortunately lost her job doing her Myrtle Mouse comic strip in the paper. As a result, she's feeling like lonely, directionless. She wants something new, and she wants a little bit of romance as well, because who doesn't? Am I right? There's a lot of nostalgia at the beginning. We revisit a lot of old characters. We find out that Eggs is gay, which I was very excited about. We see that Nadine does indeed still have a wild and kinky sex life, and that Magda is currently seeing a guy who has, I think, 2 kids. And she's kind of taken on this kind of mumsy role in order to fit into his life. We do actually see Russell. For some reason, he is invited to Ellie's 40th birthday, even though she hasn't seen him in years. And we do get to shit on Russell a little bit within the narrative, so that's always fun for me. If you know, you know, I fucking hate Russell. I appreciate it because I think it was like this acknowledgement from Jacqueline Wilson. Yes, Russell wasn't supposed to be the best idea of what a boyfriend should be like in the first place. That we got to retrospectively look back on that here, because I just hated Russell. Unfortunately, Dan was not invited to Ellie's birthday party, and I was absolutely gutted about that. Dan did not make an appearance throughout the entire narrative, and Dan was my favourite boy from the OG series, so that was really upsetting for me. As the narrative goes on, we learn that Ellie felt a lot of pressure when she had her daughter to prove herself as a young mum. She'd actually felt a lot of pressure to get rid of her daughter when she first found out she was pregnant, which, you know, is unusual in itself, as usually you would think that people would pressure you to keep a child. But people didn't want Ellie's university career and her actual job career to be ruined by this pregnancy. But Ellie wanted to keep her daughter. She therefore felt a lot of pressure to prove herself, and the comic strip, lucky as it was like this proof that she could do both, that she could be a mum and she could be a career woman and she could be successful while also keeping this child that she desperately wanted. Now that she has neither, because her kid has moved out and she's lost this job, she really is just feeling directionless and like purposeless really in life. So she kind of goes out on this self-discovery journey to find her new thing. She gets a tattoo and stuff like that. She early on meets a girl at swimming called Alice, who we find out has a girlfriend, and it's a total meet cute. And I immediately thought, if these two aren't together by the end, then I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I always know what I'm talking about. And then all of a sudden, crashing into this nice little narrative we've started to build up here about Ellie's self-discovery in her 40s, comes this romance with Guy, who is her old art teacher from the OG series. When I tell you that I screamed when the romance started up between them, when he like kissed her or whatever for the first time, I was in the bath and I had to put the book down. I couldn't believe it. This was not like a happy reaction. This was just like a what the fuck, I can't believe what I'm reading here reaction. So, Wilson, if you were looking for a reaction, then well done, you got one. I don't like the relationship with Guy, and I don't think that I'm supposed to. Again, I think it's like a Russell thing where Jacqueline Wilson has purposely written this guy who is bad for Ellie. I feel like it's a little bit of a cliched thing that's going on with Ellie almost, in that she's recreating the dynamic that she had with her dad. It's very Freudian. In the OG books, she always felt that her dad wanted a girlier kid, and so she kind of feels like she has to perform for these men, like she did with Russell, and like she's now doing with Guy in this book, where she's not kind of being true to herself and the way that she really is when she's with them. And in the way that they do kind of emulate her dad, in the way that he's like kind of sexist and kind of controlling. And as much as Ellie does really crave this closeness and this relationship with someone, with a man, potentially. He also does have these really like strong independent feelings also, where she does really value her space, and especially like no man is ever going to be on the level that her girls are, that Magna and Nadine are. So any man that comes into her life is just going to kind of have to accept that, which is not something that's easy for a partner to accept, right? So that's why her and her dad clashed, and I feel like her going after these guys that remind her of her dad is only going to make her clash with them as well. As much as it is a little bit of a cliche, I don't have a problem with this narrative. The one thing I did kind of note is that it's not treated as just an Ellie problem. Every time Ellie airs her grievances about the men that she dates and talks about the type of man that she would like to be with, all the girls just kind of poo-poo it and say like, you just want to be with a woman, as if like a sensitive and caring man who wants to know about your day and like cares about your feelings does not exist, and any woman who wants that just likes women secretly. I'm not at all trying to say that Jacqueline Wilson is trying to like indoctrinate the youth into lesbianism. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. I'm not crying gay agenda right now. What I'm saying is it's a little bit disheartening for one of my favorite authors of all time to come out and say that she doesn't think that heterosexual love exists, basically. I'm kidding. I know, I understand that that is probably what my friends would say if I were to come out and say that I wanted a sensitive man, the way that Ellie says that she wants a sensitive man in this narrative, and that maybe I shouldn't take it that seriously. But it was literally every time, and there was never a moment where a sensitive man was presented. Like maybe in the future, we will see. But it just, I don't know, it just kind of felt like as somebody who would like a sensitive man in their life, it was very disheartening to hear that many a woman does not believe that he exists. I want him to exist. Please. I think that because we spent so much time on this romance with Guy, like hammering home about the fact that her relationships with men just didn't really work, the ending for me felt a little bit rushed, and a lot of the conclusions that we came to just weren't satisfying, or we didn't really come to conclusions, especially when it comes to side characters. Ellie talks about how all she's ever wanted for Nadine is somebody who's going to like love and care for her properly, instead of all these guys who just treat her like dirt because they can't see her as anything other than a goth GF who they can do kinky things to. Nadine has one really scary experience with a guy and just does the same thing she always does, where she says she's swearing off guys again, when we all know that that's just not gonna happen, Nadine. She's a lover girl for real. And then on the other hand, Magda once again changed her entire personality to fit into a man's world and is going for this whole mumsy vibe that is just so not her, because she's a sexy little sauce pot. She always has been. That's been her whole vibe the entire time, and we don't want to see her change that just to get a proposal from a man. And she does kind of come to realize, they start to introduce her more sexy clothing back into her wardrobe and stuff like that. With the kids, she was trying to be all mumsy towards them, and I think she takes more of like a cool mom approach towards the end. We don't really see whether this approach like really works for her, if she gets together with the guy at the end, if she decides that, yeah, he's not what she really wants. Like, we don't really kind of see a conclusion on that. We just see her starting on that journey. All this stuff is unresolved, and then Ellie and Alice, the girl with the girlfriend from the beginning, she breaks up with the girlfriend, and her and Ellie end up getting together on the very, very last page. And so I feel like there's just not a lot of exploration of Ellie coming to terms with the fact that she likes women now, or like introducing like a woman into her life when everybody thinks she's straight. Like, I feel like that could have been a really interesting thing to write about. And it's for all of these reasons that I think that Jacqueline Wilson might just write as a sequel. God fucking willing, because I would love that this year, please. Jacqueline Wilson, if you are listening. Summary review, I think that this was a lovely catch up. I love that the characters feel like they've genuinely had lives this whole time, but they are still recognizable as the characters that we know and love. Nadine is having boy trouble. She's a thrill seeker. Magda's having an identity crisis over a man. Even Dad is still obsessed with getting old, although he is by this point what would be probably be classed as an elderly gentleman. I think the biggest criticism that I saw when watching other reviews for this book once I was finished was that it's like not realistic that Ellie, Magda, and Nadine are so close friends as they are still, and that Ellie wouldn't have other friends that she's maybe closer with, or just any other friends at all. However, if we look back to the original series, we see that Ellie was always the clingy one with the other two, and she was always the glue that held the other two together. Like, the other two were always moody, and Ellie was the one who kept the peace and stopped everybody from fighting. And she also never really stood up for herself, which is what made her so easy to get along with and not to be mad at, right? I think that it's realistic to the character. It makes sense for the character that she's like clung to these relationships. Became a young mum, she didn't really have the opportunities to go out and to make these other friends, and so she would have clung even harder to the ones that she had already, right? I think that it's like central to the themes of the book that Ellie cling to these relationships so that she can have these revelations in her midlife crisis storyline that we're currently covering, okay? I wasn't condescending, it wasn't. Another thing that I saw people talking about that was really confusing for me was that, like, there were mistakes in this in regards stuff that didn't line up with the original series. One of them was the name of the teacher that she's dating. Apparently, like, in the original series it was Guy, and I was sure in the copy that I was reading it was Guy as well, but people were saying that she changed it to like Gary or something, that it didn't line up with the old series. I had a Mandela effect moment, me bro. I was like checking back through my book being like, have I just not even realized that there's a mistake here because I've filled in the information that I know from the original series with my with my galaxy brain. But no, it turns out that I think they've like reprinted it and fixed the retcons, because there was another one with like an inconsistency about something to do with Ellie's old elephant toy when she was younger, but I can't quite remember what it was now. But that one also seemed to have been like retconned in the version of the book that I have. So, something interesting to note. In conclusion, I feel like I love a midlife crisis storyline at this point, bro. I feel like I can admit it. I feel like they're just a coming of age story for older readers, and I've always loved a coming of age story. It's like, you remember that quote from Adventure Time? I can't remember it word for word right now, but you know when he says, growing up is all about learning from your mistakes and you never really stop growing. I feel like we all just really need to accept that. There's something so pure about like a coming of age, a midlife crisis storyline where somebody like rediscovers themselves or like learns something new about themselves. And I think especially like the later life versions of these stories are really uplifting, because there is still a stigma about like life stopping at a certain age and you not being able to do new things after a certain time and having to become a boring old grandma or whatever. And I think that's bullshit. In regards to this book specifically, I absolutely ace it up. I devoured it. It was fun for nostalgia reasons. Obviously, when I read Jacqueline Wilson, for me, like, I grew up reading her. It's always feels very homely, it feels very comfy, and I can't deny that that's part of the appeal for me. But I think trying to take a step back and take off my nostalgia glasses for a moment, I feel like it's just as good as anything else that I've read in this category that takes this trajectory, and I look forward to anything else that she might decide to bring out within Ellie's storyline, because I'm eager to know more. I'm eager for her to introduce Alice to her friends, to find out what happens to Magda and Nadine. I feel like I just didn't really see enough of them in this book for some reason. We spent too much time with Guy. I appreciated what you were trying to say, but fuck Guy. I'm gonna leave it there on that note, and I'll see you next time.